This is Wraith from Wraith Rain. I'm an author of serialized gay romance fiction. Every week on this podcast, I'll be reading a chapter from one of my gay fantasy shifter serials called Dragon's Reign. I'll explain at the break how you can find out more about this story and others I write. So let's get to it. Chapter 92, Family Matters. Silence fell after Caden's pronouncement. Whatever the reporters had thought about Caden and Iolaire was now forever changed. But not in a bad way. Both could clearly be kind, but both could be fierce. Valerius felt incredibly proud.
"Well," Carlos thumped his left thigh with one hand. Well, fireworks there. You're quite the speaker, young man."
Valerius loved it when Caden lifted an expressive eyebrow at Carlos. Caden might be a young man, but he was also a dragon shifter. Carlos held up his hands as if in mock surrender.
"I just meant that you are more than you seem, which is why I think we all need to pull back a bit and ask about who you are, King Caden," Carlos stated genially. "We skipped the introductions because there was so much juicy speculation about dragon babies."
Carlos let out a soft huff of laughter as he met Valerius's eyes and winked. Valerius lifted an eyebrow in surprise. Of all the reporters, he thought that Carlos would be the softest, but he suddenly wondered if he had gotten the man all wrong. He let the other two spar while he sat back for the most part, but now Carlos had center stage, as Lisa and Claire had dug themselves into holes with everyone. Carlos turned that genial smile on Claire. She, however, pointedly ignored him and was scrolling on her phone. Lisa sat very still between the two of them. Caden had affected her, whether for good or bad, Valerius couldn't say. She was an excellent reporter, which meant she would never be a friend. Her reputation depended on asking the hard questions, which was likely why Shioni had invited her. If Shioni had stuck with only reporters that would send softballs Caden's way, the speculation would have been rampant. This was the elephant in the room, the death of innocence by his and Raziel's hands. Yet Caden had answered for his crimes. But Caden had somehow turned Raziel's fury and fear into something understandable, something that people could forgive. His eyes slid to his counselor, who was now at the right side of their sofa. "Do you think Shioni knew this? Do you think she realized that Caden would be the perfect person to answer for what we did?" Valerius asked Raziel, but his spirit remained blissfully unaware of the drama it had caused. He found himself smiling at how sweet Iolaire and Raziel looked. Iolaire's head rested on Raziel's stomach. Whenever his spirit breathed, Iolaire's head lifted then fell. Iolaire's back feet scrabbled a bit on the cavern floor, likely chasing cows in its sleep, just like Caden had thought earlier.
"There's nothing really interesting about me," Caden said warily.
Evidently, he had learned quickly that the press were not to be trusted.
"A person doesn't simply sacrifice themselves to save others without being somewhat extraordinary."
Carlos wagged a finger at Caden as if he were being naughty. He turned instead to Caden's family.
"Let's see what those who know you best think."
Ellen had high spots of color on her cheeks, and she was perched on the edge of the couch, ready to spring off of it and rip to shreds the next reporter who insinuated something negative about her son. Grant's eyes were narrowed as he surveyed the reporters like they were adversaries in the courtroom. Tilly had her arms tightly wound around her chest and was glaring at them. Despite being very mature for her age, Tilly's reaction to say that she hated Lisa was likely the truest. He was amused to see that Lisa had a hard time looking at Tilly. There were costs to being a good reporter. Carlos leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees as he fixed Ellen in his gaze.
"Ellen. I can call you Ellen, can't I?"
When Ellen nodded hesitantly, Carlos continued on. "You are the mother of the 9th dragon shifter. You are also a member of the faith." Ellen's right hand had drifted up to the necklace that she wore. She immediately dropped it in her lap, self-conscious. "Yes, I am, but one has nothing to do with the other." Ellen let out an uncertain laugh.
"Perhaps not, but you have an eye for the spirits. Did you see any signs that Caden might one day become a shifter?" Carlos added.
Ellen's lips parted. Valerius assumed she would murmur, "No," and then would look away. His understanding of Ellen was that she was a private person and not one to brag. She would have listened to the other parents rave on about their children being special, but she would only silently think hers were. "I didn't want him to be." Ellen said. Mom? Caden asked with a half laugh. Shifters have to leave their families, Caden. Why would I ever want that? She asked. Oh, Mom, Caden said, and he went over to her and hugged her. There was something that was not often seen in interviews, nor was it often seen a mother clutch her son to her. Caden pulled back, but stayed hunkered by his mother's feet. She kept her right hand on Caden's shoulder while she dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Becoming the 9th Dragon Shifter was lucky, amazing in so many ways, but mostly because we got to keep him, Ellen explained. I would never have gone away, as long as you didn't want me to. Caden glanced over at Rose as he said this. The swarm shifter came over and gave Ellen more tissues, while rubbing her shoulders. Ellen reached out and took Rose's hand and brought it to her cheek. We're told that people happily give up their children, their spouse, their parents, their friends. But how can that be true? Ellen asked. Rose's eyes were suspiciously wet. Valerius was surprised to see that Lisa was discreetly wiping hers as well. I think there are so many wonderful, beautiful things about the spirits and shifters, Ellen said with a watery smile, but that I just couldn't understand. So Caden being a dragon shifter meant he stayed. Well, really, we went with him. You're living in High Reach now, I heard, Carlos prompted. I imagine that, in addition to being here to be by your son, that you're also here for protection. A few nights ago, there was a bomb scare at your house. That was humans first, Caden said as he stood up, gave his mom's hand a squeeze before settling back down with Valerius. The Black Dragon King slid a comforting arm around his shoulder. Rose, though, took Caden's place and remained perched on the couch beside Ellen. Caden continued with a low growl in his voice. Jasper Hawes found out who I was and wanted to blackmail me into helping his group. He intimated that another bomb had been placed at my family's home. Lisa scribbled frantically while Claire's mouth fell open. Carlos's eyebrows rose. I'm sure you know how volatile things are with humans first, Carlos stated smoothly. There are a lot of people who think that they have a point, even if they abhor their methods. To say that Jasper Hawes threatened your family, well, it's explosive. Caden linked fingers with Valerius. He took a breath. I know why people sympathize with some of what they say. He glanced over at Wally. There's always been thumbs in the scale to help or hinder us. Some people have had a whole fist against them. Some humans likely feel that way. I know that good, talented people aren't able to achieve their dreams because they're human. And you can't just say, oh, if you work hard enough, because working hard can't make you a shifter. Claire was blinking rapidly. Lisa looked like she wasn't breathing. Carlos was simply nodding along as if what Caden had just said wasn't something revolutionary. Before I became the 9th Dragon Shifter, I was working for Wally. Caden grinned at the rat shifter who did a little salute. I was still working for him afterwards, too, because I loved that job. Don't worry, kid. You always have a place selling merch. You're natural, Wally chirruped, which had everyone smiling. He rocked back and forth on his heels, grinning like some good gnome. The thing is, though, I wasn't sure if I could get any other work. I know my parents were worried about it, that I wouldn't be able to have the life they'd had, Caden explained simply. They thought that the opportunities for humans just weren't there anymore. Carlos continued to act as if this were also very natural and casual, just a conversation with a really good listener. And what do you think is the cause of that? I think some of it has always been there, inequality. But Caden rolled his lips as he clearly thought hard how to say this. But things have changed for humanity since shifters came out of the shadows. Such as? Carlos spread his hands as if he had no idea what Caden would say, and maybe he didn't. Caden gave his father a sheepish smile. Mind if I use you, Dad? His father nodded. Go ahead. My father graduated top of his class at law school. He did finally get into a firm, and he made partner. But no matter how brilliant he was, when someone was choosing a lawyer, they would often choose a raven shifter over him as the main party to represent them. Now, I'm sure that people might say, well, maybe your dad was good at school, but not as a lawyer. Or maybe your dad doesn't have the personality to pull in clients. Grant gave his son a grin. Caden continued. But the truth is that people wanted the raven shifter as their lawyer, because that person had been performing law for over 200 years. We know that experience does count for things. Not to mention a vast majority of judges now are raven shifters. Maybe that client believed that a raven shifter judge might just believe a raven shifter lawyer's argument a little bit more than a human's. Now, I'm not saying that's true.
But I think we all can agree that's not out of the realm of possibility for it to be so, or for people to believe it is enough so that it affects their decisions. Lisa turned to Grant. Do you think that there is prejudice in the legal system against human lawyers and maybe even human defendants? Grant gave her a tight smile. I think that humans, or shifters, well, that we all have prejudices, Ms. Yang. Lisa, of course, decided to press her luck as she asked, You are set to work for the Supreme Court, Mr. Bryce. What part did your son play in getting your position, and what influence might he have over future decisions of the court? Grant met her gaze evenly. I imagine that my son being the 9th dragon shifter raised my profile. Most jobs, especially the prestigious ones, aren't always obtained by sheer raw talent. What I do intend to do is to make sure that I am always checking my prejudices so I'm aware of them. Claire, whose head had been up from her phone, was glancing around at each of them. This is really cool. Like, no one talks about this stuff. I mean, they do, but with their friends, or Jasper Hawes just screeches it. Valerius let out a huff of a laugh. Yes, he does at that. But he does not serve the people he alleges that he wishes to help by his violent actions.
Did you know that you can get some of my gay romance books for free? Every month, I have at least one book free to download, right from Amazon, so you can easily read it on any device. But these books can only be free for 5 days at a time. If you don't want to miss out, just sign up for my mailing list, and I'll send you an email whenever there's a free book available. The link to the sign-up form is in the description down below.
It's not just humans, though, that feel and actually have been prejudiced against, Caden said as his eyes slid to Rose, who was holding his mom's hand. The day I became the White Dragon Shifter and hid the below, I met Rose. She gave him a quirk smile. I had never talked to a swarm shifter before, and though I am a dragon shifter, I'm ashamed to admit that I was scared of her, Caden said with a self-conscious shrug. Bee stingers cannot pierce dragon's hide, Valerius gently reminded him. Caden laughed. I know, but I had heard all these terrible things about swarm shifters. He looked up at Rose again, who grimaced. I thought they were bad people. I'm sure that all of us can think of a shifter type that means the person is bad. But swarm shifters are murderers and stuff. No offense to your friend, but a lot of them are. That's their nature, isn't it? Claire asked. Valerius repressed a smile as Caden answered dryly. Not only is she my friend, but also one of my counselors, just like Shione is to Valerius. Rose is to me. Claire's mouth dropped open. Oh, well, that's, wow, you're really brave. I mean, like I said, I was scared of her too. I thought probably the same thing you do about swarm shifters. I was wrong. You are wrong, Claire, Caden simply stated, and Rose looked down. Valerius thought he might have caught a tear in her eyes. There was silence in the room. No one said these things, not really, not dragon shifters anyways. There was a hierarchy that had stood the test of time, but he was on the top of that hierarchy, so it suited him. Lisa then leaned forward like a cat that had spotted a bowl of cream. That is a very unorthodox choice for a counselor, not just because she's a swarm shifter, but isn't she also one of Marban's granddaughters? Rose did not stiffen. She looked at Lisa out of narrowed eyes, though, but there was a tensity about her. She clearly feared what price Caden would pay on her account. But his brave King Caden was not going to back down. I doubt you'll find a person in the below that doesn't owe Marban something, Caden answered her coolly. But not only is Rose not a murderer, and I can't believe I'm having to say that, she's also a very good person, smart and kind and tough. I want you to think about how Jasper Hawes claims that humans are the bottom of the pack now, and consider that Claire here thinks that swarm shifters are all murderers. Meaning that it's not just whether you're a shifter or human, but what kind of shifter, too, that can make your life easier or harder? Grant asked, his legal mind clearly organizing his own thoughts about his position and the difficulties he'd faced, and likely comparing it to what Rose had. Exactly, Dad. My mom talked about how shifters have to leave their families. Caden shook his head as if the very idea appalled him. Why do they have to? Should we be encouraging that? And imagine if you join with your spirit and you're one of the shifters that people are afraid of. Then you go home to your family and they reject you too. Think on what that would do to a person. It would be awful, Claire breathed. Yeah, it would be. Your job fires you when they find out what you are. Your friends desert you with fear or disgust in their eyes. Your family rejects you as if you're suddenly a different person. You have no one and nothing from your old life. Caden paused and grimaced. You do what you have to do to survive. And when someone like Marban offers you a hand, maybe the only hand you've seen since you've joined with your spirit, can you really turn it down? Maybe you think you'd be stronger or too moral for that. But if we're honest with ourselves, not many of us, maybe none of us, could just walk away from that offer of help. What you're saying is admirable, Carlos remarked, but it's also deeply entrenched prejudice and societal structure at work. Valerius's eyebrows lifted. Carlos might look like a genial idiot, but he clearly wasn't. Things have got to change for that very reason, Caden said with an almost helpless laugh. I know, it sounds Pollyanna-ish. Change, like it's so easy. But we've got to try. So, is that something you're going to tackle? Carlos asked. I am. And I'm reaching out to everyone on this. I'm going to talk about it because we don't and we need to, Caden answered him. Caden then spoke to the cameras again. We're not going to let those that would spread hate be the only voices out there any longer. We see you, the good and the bad. We hear you, and we want to hear more. Lisa turned towards Ellen as she asked, while the faith worships all spirits, don't they also view certain spirits as indicators of whether a person is, well, good or bad? Ellen straightened up again. The same prejudices in the general populace are in the faith. But none of those indicators is actually written down. It's something people bring with them, not gospel, and I don't agree with it. She squeezed Rose's hand tighter. Valerius's focus had never been on the prejudice that anyone faced. He had not wanted to be bothered with anyone, let alone the ridiculous ways that people viewed one another. But he saw now that ignoring the inequalities and the misunderstandings people had between humans and shifters had allowed not only humans first to rise, but also for a portion of the faith to twist into something unrecognizable. He patted Caden's back comfortingly. He was right that Caden was trouble, but the best kind. Rose was giving Caden one of those smiles that said she was proud and still somehow surprised at the same time. Is that true of you as well, King Valerius? Or is this crusade of equal justice something that you are behind as well? Lisa asked. When I said that Caden made me see things differently, this was one of them. I intend to listen and to add my voice when I can add value. All of the Dragon Shifters will do so, Larry stated. This listening will include a council of shifters that Marban is heading up, and I think a council of humans would be appropriate as well. Not just world leaders, but everyday people. Too long have we not heard their voices. Caden gave him a brilliant smile and kissed him lightly. Valerius could almost feel the cameras zooming in on their faces, but he loved every minute of it, because kissing Caden was always perfect. How does your son's becoming a shifter change your view of the faith, Mrs. Bryce? What role do you expect to play in the faith going forward? Lisa pressed. I think we always hope our children turn out well. Truthfully, Caden has always been as earnest and brave as you see him now. A fond smile crossed her face. When he was 5, he saw some other kids hurting a wounded fox. He charged right at them, ended up with a black eye and a split lip, but you should have seen the others. The fox was saved, Grant added. My wife is right. Our son came from us, and we tried to guide him as best as we could, but we can't claim to be responsible for who he is. Grant stroked Tilly's hair. Both of our children are amazing, and I am stunned every day by them. Tilly suddenly became the center of attention. She sat up straighter in the beautiful dress that Esme had made for her. Tilly, you're clearly your brother's protector, Lisa stated with a small smile. Yeah, for sure. Especially if someone actually thinks he would be okay with people dying. Tilly gave her a pointed look. Lisa glanced down at her notes and cleared her throat. Well, yes, quite. Now, what is it like having the 9th Dragon Shifter as your big brother? I've always been this awesome, Till, Caden laughed. Tilly stuck her tongue out him and then primly smoothed her hands down her dress. Other than getting dragon rides, living in a castle, meeting so many cool people, and being interviewed, it's the same as it's always been. Valerius chuckled. He wasn't alone. That had even won over Miss Yang. What I mean is that Caden hasn't changed. He's always been this way. Pretty great most of the time, Tilly explained as the laughter died down.
Just the things around us have gone a little crazy. Ah, Till. Caden once again crossed to his family and he hugged Tilly. I'm the one who's lucky to have you. Do you think people are going to look at you differently, Tilly? Claire asked. Tilly nodded slowly. Probably. I think I probably would if it were happening to a friend of mine. Think they'll be jealous? Claire twinkled at her. I just hope they'll want to be part of it, like still my friend. Tilly showed a spark of fragility there. That truly won Claire over. I get you. When I started doing YouTube and no one was watching, it didn't matter to anyone. But then when I got a little more attention, there were some people who, I think they changed. What did you do? Tilly asked, searching Claire's face for answers. Some of them aren't my friends anymore, Claire admitted with a sad smile. But there were others who were there for me through thick and thin. You'll have those too. They're the ones that matter. Listen to them, not the ones that try and tear you down. Good advice, Claire, Caden said. I think I'll be taking that to heart too. Valerius wondered if Caden was thinking of Landry then. His heart ached a little for the young man who tried so desperately to see the best in people. Shioni suddenly stepped forward and said, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today's questions. There will be other interviews at future times, but today's are done. Thank you so much. Valerius wondered if when they saw the dissections of every word everyone said, not to mention the histories of everyone in the room, if they would really be thanking the press. He stood up and Caden came into his arms. How did I do? Caden asked. Valerius pressed a kiss to his forehead. You were yourself. Is that good? Caden let out an uncertain laugh. Yes, Valerius assured him. Always.
I hope you're enjoying Dragon's Reign so far. Dragon's Reign is free for you to enjoy, but not free for us to make. There is a whole team working with me for audio editing, artwork, graphic design, and custom music. Most YouTube channels and podcasts have sponsors and take ads, but because of the kind of content we make, we can't run ads or get sponsors. Instead, we have other ways you can support me and the team behind this gay romance audiobook. One easy way is to buy or borrow my books from Amazon. They are all gay romance set in alternative worlds with vampires or shifters and other magical beings. You may not know that even if you borrow books with your Kindle Unlimited subscription at Amazon, they are free for you, but they still earn us money. The books are published under the name Ex Aratare, which actually means wraith in Romanian. And if you love audiobooks, you can get professionally narrated versions of every one of my books on audible.com. The link to my author page is in the description below, as well as to the first book of the series I think you'll really like. Thank you so much for your support. People like you enable me and the team to keep writing these stories of gay romance, magic, monsters, and true love, and producing this very fun podcast for everyone. Thank you.